Hi there, it's day one. Yay! Let's get into phonics and phonological and phonemic awareness. So many words that start with P. Let me share my screen so we can get started. Alrighty. Day one, phonics and PA. I'm just going to call it PA just to keep things rolling along for us. So let's look at the literacy block and where this fits in. Well, it fits in right there. You'll notice that I don't have a separate phonemic awareness instruction time. It's not a standalone thing. It's embedded with the phonics, and we'll explore a little bit more about that as we go along. Firstly, let's have a look at phonological and phonemic awareness and what they are. Phonological awareness is the broad skill that includes identifying and manipulating units of oral language. So we've got words, syllables, and onsets and rhyme. Now, this is often referred to as phonological sensitivity. It's almost, the way I think of it is it's like the overall health of language related to reading. Phonemic awareness, on the other hand, is literally that focus on phonemes, being able to identify them, manipulate them, as in blending and segmenting, and then we get into those higher skills such as substituting. But this is the fundamental breakdown of these skills: phonological sensitivity and then the phonemic awareness. A lack of these skills is a primary predictor of reading difficulty. There are other indicators as well, but a lack of these skills developing at an appropriate rate is a red flag. Now, the current recommendations around how to teach these skills are that while they can be performed with your eyes closed, that's kind of part of the definition, phonemic awareness is more effective when combined with phoneme-grapheme correspondence. So when you use letters that the children know and incorporate that into the phonics lesson, the learning is much stronger. And it's not just David Kilpatrick who says it, it's also in the National Reading Panel report. And there is so much information now to back this up that if you're not including phonological and phonemic awareness, or phonemic awareness rather, into your phonics lesson, it's time to start. The National Reading Panel found that programs that last, this is phonological and phonemic awareness programs that last between 5 and 18 hours were more effective than programs that ran for longer. Now, if we think about how we teach these skills in our classrooms, many schools have programs that last 2, 3, 4 years of this stuff. And in fact, the research evidence is that it's really not necessary, that we kind of just need to use it when we need to use it. And once the children have the skills, we stop doing it. We don't have to continue it. Explicit whole class instruction in this is beneficial. This is what the reading panel found in the first year of school. And then beyond that is really delivered to the students who require Tier 2 intervention. Now, that may be surprising, so I'm going to run through it again. When they're little, whole class instruction in phonemic awareness is really valuable. But as they get that bigger, everyone doesn't need it, and your data will tell you who those children are who need additional support in this area. So if you're a year 1 or 2 teacher and most of your class is just rolling along, they're developing well, whatever, you don't need to be doing these oral whole class programs in your classroom. There may be a few questions around that, and there's the link for the question sheet underneath the video. Please pop them in. The main skills to develop are blending and segmenting. So once children have that phonological sensitivity, that awareness of rhyming and syllables and those sorts of things, and, you know, with that, I recommend that you don't necessarily have to have 20, 30 minutes every day of instructional time for that. You could embed that in other things. It's one of the things we look at in the teach along. Then it's blending and segmenting that get the children reading and spelling. When it comes to those higher order skills, the substitution and deletion and the addition of phonemes, it's an awareness of spelling and how words work that build those skills. For the vast majority of children, they actually don't need full explicit instruction in the higher order skills. And again, that's very different from what you may have heard and what may be happening in your classroom. So, yep, you may need to rewatch this because I'm fully aware that this is quite different from what we have been told previously. So where does that leave us in terms of our phonological and phonemic awareness? If you have an oral whole class program in your school, I'm not saying put it in the bin, but keep it short and sharp. We're talking 5 minutes. The reading panel, National Reading Panel from 2001 found that focusing on just 1 or 2 skills at a time was preferable to doing a whole bunch of skills all at once. So look at your data, be targeted. If your students can already clap syllables, don't do that anymore. Move on to something else. Effectively, in my mind, that oral practice with the book where you do this thing whole class orally is just reinforcement and practice. The actual instruction of this stuff comes in your phonics lesson in terms of blending, segmenting, and beyond. Okay, let's move into phonics. English has one of the most opaque orthographies in the world. That means stuff gets complicated. There are multiple ways to represent phonemes, and multiple graphemes can represent the different phonemes as well. So we have to look at this from a sound perspective, from a phoneme perspective. What are the different ways that we represent the sounds of English, but also from the other way in terms of spelling. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm just going to carry on with the presentation. An understanding of the alphabetic principle is critical to development of reading and spelling. People think you can bypass it, but you just can't. There are 44 phonemes of standard Australian English and between 150 and 200 representations of these graphemes. Now, some children will just pick these up. You'll expose them to some words. They'll remember it. Their brain just puts it all together. Most children are going to need some explicit instruction, and a small subset of children are students with additional needs, such as dyslexia or other challenges, are going to need extremely explicit, stepped out, intense instruction. So if we give everyone good explicit instruction, everyone's on the path, and then we can give that additional little bit to those children who need it. There are 75 core graphemes. This is from Denise Eads' book, Uncovering the Logic of English. Great book. Synthetic phonics involves teaching these letter sound correspondences and then teaching children to blend words. What are the recommendations about teaching phonics? Well, I've already said explicit about 500 times, so that will give you a clue. So the recommended approach to phonics instruction from the National Reading Panel report was that it's systematic and explicit. The recommendations from other people as well is that it's synthetic. So synthetic isn't about being fake, it's about synthesizing, and so putting things together. We have to teach the phoneme grapheme correspondences of the whole code, not just the basic code and a little bit of the complex code, and then they pick it up through spelling lists and reading books. We have to explicitly teach the whole code across those first 3 years of school. Phonics needs to be cumulative. So each section builds on the one before. So once you know 5 graphemes or 5 sounds, you can read words with those. Then when we add another 5, now you can read a whole bunch more words, and we add another 5 and you can read many more words. And so when we're teaching, the things have to be cumulative, and we have to be mindful of that in the activities we're giving children, and particularly in the books that we're providing for them. Our instruction needs to encourage a set for variability. And in our day on decodable text, we're going to get into this more. But essentially, we need to help children understand that our code is not one-to-one correspondence. So when we're teaching the sound S, for example, instead of saying, this is the letter S and its sound is S, or this is the letter C, is a better example, and its sound is K. What we might say is, one of the ways that we can write the sound S is with this letter S, or one of the ways we can write the sound K is with this letter C. So just that simple shift in language, one of the ways, helps children understand that things are going to be variable, and this is really important when it comes to moving children on from decodable text, but we're going to talk about that another day. The recommendation is that reading and writing words is included in every lesson. There is a significant positive impact on reading from spelling instruction. So it's not about having separate reading, separate spelling, and you do them and they're, all decontextualized and they're standalone. It's about combining them. How much decoding and how much comprehension do we use in the early years? Well, here is a suggestion. Louisa Moats tells us that reading comprehension in the early years is heavily, heavily dependent on the ability to decode. And the reason for that is that most of the material that we're asking children to read, the level of language in that material is what is already sitting in their oral spoken language. So we don't have to teach them to understand what they're reading in their little decodable text in foundation or year one, because they've got it. Doesn't mean we ignore comprehension. We still need to do some things, but the major focus is on decoding. It's a really good idea to get yourself a structure. If your school has a really good, solid synthetic phonics program, get really good at using it. Make sure that your whole team is on the same page, that they're following the steps and everyone's teaching in that same way. If you don't have one, find as a lesson sequence. And in fact, I've given you some lesson plans under this video today. This is from my Reading Success in Action lesson sequence book. Pretty much all systematic synthetic phonics programs have the same elements. So if you want to, you can press pause and scan those QR codes and have a look at what a lesson might look like. The key to successful phonological and phonemic awareness and phonics is make it no nonsense. You don't have time to muck around. You don't need all the most amazing small group rotation activities and you're spending every weekend preparing them. You need a scope and sequence and a good teaching routine that's low variance, which means it's done the same way every day. Focus on building your skill and the student's familiarity with teacher-led lessons rather than those small group rotation activities. Use those repeatable, as I've mentioned, low variance routines. Your struggling students, part of the reason that they may be causing a behavioral disruption to your class is that they don't know what's going on. They're left to their own devices. Repeatable low variance routines create safety. It lightens your cognitive load 100% because you know what's going to happen. You develop this kind of muscle memory for how we're going to teach. And it's the same for the students. They develop this safety and the predictability. Children with trauma, children with ADHD, children on the autism spectrum, just children do much better with these low variance routines. Keep the pace snappy. If you're talking like this or you're trying to teach and there's 47 interruptions because this child doesn't know where to find their whiteboard marker and that one wants to sit next to a friend and we've got to get all of that under control so the pace can be snappy and everyone can be engaged. Include graphemes into the phonemic awareness, that blending and segmenting as soon as students know the phoneme grapheme correspondence. So as soon as they have a few sounds that includes a vowel, start to include the word level reading and spelling. Keeping phonics and PA simple is about finding a simple resource to organize content according to a scope and sequence. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. The more creative types among us might say, I might invent my own scope and sequence, which you can. There's no perfect one, and there's nothing to stop you doing that. But that means you have to align everything, and you need resources that support you. I've already said embed the PA into the phonics lesson. Keep assessment simple and focus on subsets of skills. What are you assessing? You're assessing how well do they know phoneme grapheme correspondence? How well could they blend? Are they saying k, at, or are they saying cat, or are they saying cat? What is that looking like? Those subsets of skills help you really drill down and get very specific about how to build the strength in your students' skills. You can use exit tickets and focus children for formative assessment opportunities. So you don't necessarily, for PA particularly, that phonological and phonemic awareness, you don't necessarily have to sit every child down on their own to assess them. If you have time, that's great. But, we're all time poor, aren't we? So if you have a checklist and you have exit tickets as they go out of the classroom, they go to recess or lunch, you go, I'm going to have a look at, can they provide me with a rhyming word? Jimmy, what rhymes with cat? And if Jimmy says dog, okay, we're still working on that. And you can tick it off and away you can go. So keeping things simple is about keeping assessment simple as well. Where to from here? This is absolutely a Kentucky tour of these areas, I'm aware. I'm sorry. Download the reflection and planning sheet. Take 5 minutes to fill it in. It's going to help you to really get clear around where the areas of strength in your classroom are and where you could strengthen. Submit any questions that you have in the button underneath the video. Remember to register for the live wrap-up session. It's going to be worth your while, I promise. If you are a past Reading Success Teach Along participant, you're going to have a look at modules 4, 5, and 6 with all of that detail about the practicalities we went into. Check your email again tomorrow for clip number 2, where we're going to look at the next section of our literacy block. There has been a lot in, oh, I missed one. Check in with the Facebook group because there'll be some things in there for you as well. Okay, that's day 1. I know it's fast and I know there's a lot there. So rewatch if you need to, ask all the questions. And I really wish you an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.